and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. If you're thinking about micronutrients for your farm, chances are the one that's probably going to give you the most payback is zinc. We're seeing zinc shortages almost everywhere that we see farming happening. We'll talk about why zinc's important and how to fix it on your farm.
Well, 2019 was an extremely challenging year, so we want to talk today about how do you handle those unplanted acres in 2019? What should you be planting in 2020? What should your overall plan be?
Well, one thing we don't want to see on those unplanted acres is our weed of the week. We'll talk about how to stop this tough weed a little later in the show. But first, here's our farm basics.
The last thing you want after harvesting your grain is to spoil it before it goes to market. The Grain Temp Guard from Farm Shop MFG is a low-cost bin monitoring solution that tracks temperature and humidity and alerts you when conditions exceed safe thresholds. Visit farmshopmfg.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about what is a winter annual.
Well, pleasant weather in the fall and a little bit of fall moisture leads to some weeds that want to germinate right now, get a good start out in the field, kind of lay dormant over the winter, and then bam, in the spring they're big. They got a fast head start over all the annual weeds that get started in the spring and also spring planted crops. We call them winter annual weeds. They are terrible. So if you see them out in fields right now, you probably see a farmer with a sprayer or doing some sort of tillage pass to try to wipe them out so they don't destroy his yields next year.
Yep, so the big difference here, we talk about winter annual weeds and summer annual weeds. These are both just one-year weeds. So they aren't perennials, they aren't biennials or anything like that, weeds that will live for more than 1 year. But these winter annuals are the ones that will germinate and actually start growing already in the fall. They will be up, they'll be emerged. It might seem like they're going to die because of the winter and the frost and everything, but it doesn't fully happen. They might actually die back to the ground, but they are still very active below the surface of the soil, and when spring comes, just like Darren said, these things just take off. So those are the winter annual weeds, and the reason why we're talking about these today is they've become much more of a problem in the United States and really around the world as farmers have done less tillage.
Well, you're exactly right. Farmers used to do a lot of tillage after harvest in the fall. They've gone away from that for a number of reasons, including reducing erosion, but one of the things that's popped up is different weed species that really thrive. Some of those weed species are grass weeds, others are broadleaves, but the ones that are winter annuals that get that fall start are the ones that we're most concerned about today. So let's talk about some of the grasses, for example, like cheatgrass or downy brome that get started in winter wheat fields. Well, that can be a real challenge because you have a grass growing in a grass crop. And especially when they're really small, it may be hard to identify which grasses are out there. So farmers that typically fight winter annual grasses have a pretty good grasp of which weeds they're actually seeing on a normal year, and they're out there when the weather conditions are right for germination in the fall.
There are also a lot of winter annual broadleaf weeds. I think about field pennycress or henbit. There are a lot of these, again, that we see really popping up in no-till, in strip-till, because the late fall tillage and early spring tillage aren't being done on those fields.
Well, also, Brian, mare's tail. Don't forget about mare's tail. When we see mare's tail getting going, that tends to be one of the worst weeds that we face in our country because it gets such a good start that it's big in the spring. And here's the other challenge. You say, well, a farmer could just go spray it in the spring then and kill it. That sounds good, but it's really not that easy because when you've got a big plant with a huge root system underneath it, it takes a really good dose of a herbicide to get it under control. And when we've got cold weather, those herbicides don't work very well because they've got to move all through the plant, and they just don't move very well when we've got cold temperatures.
And the big thing is a lot of the herbicides are labeled to control weeds up to 4 inches tall. A lot of times winter annual weeds, by the time the farmer can spray in the spring, are bigger than 4 inches. So that's why the farmer has to come up with an alternative plan, and that's why we're talking about winter annual weeds today.
One other weed we're going to talk about today is our weed of the week. We'll show you how to control this tough weed later in the show.
More choices, more money. With Bayer Plus Rewards, you choose from our broad portfolio of high-performance products. Earn more money on the eligible products that are right for your farm. And use our new portal to see your purchases, track your rewards, and decide how you want to use them. Visit mybayerplus.com to sign in and start earning. That's the advantage of more control in your hands. That's the plus.
In 1949, Morton Buildings constructed our first machine storage building to establish our bond with the farming community. Since then, our relationship has grown, and so have our product offerings. From the smallest specialized operation to the largest agricultural enterprise, we understand the needs of your business and continue to evolve to meet industry demands. Plus, when you build a Morton building, you're backed by the strongest warranty in the business. To learn more about the Morton Advantage, visit mortonbuildings.com.
Tough, precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/agphd.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
Ideal for herbicide applications, the ultra-low drifts large air-inducted droplets were designed to eliminate driftable fines without sacrificing coverage. Its thick three-dimensional pattern creates multiple angles for the spray to cover the target. Hypro, helping you spray better.
It's fall, so I know you're thinking about fertility on your farm, but don't just think about N, P, and K. It's super important to take a look at soil pH, the secondary nutrients, and micronutrients, including our topic today, which is zinc. So today with zinc, we're going to talk about why it's so important and what kind of levels you should look for in your soil.
First of all, when Brian said we want to talk about looking at zinc, I've seen so many soil samples that have NPK, maybe the secondary nutrients, and zinc. And that's the only micronutrient that was tested for. I don't want to mislead you today and have you thinking, you know what, Brian and Darren said, well, I just have to test for zinc. That's going to be the most important micro. Hey, it may be the most important micro for you on your soil, but you do need to do a complete analysis and look at all the different micros. We see some interactions between nutrients, whether it's micronutrients or also micronutrients with some of these primary nutrients. Like today we're talking about zinc, and one of the big primary nutrients we look at is phosphorus. And when we have a high amount of phosphorus out in soils, adequate levels of zinc become really critical for you.
All right, before we go through what kind of levels you should have for phosphorus and zinc and all that, let's talk about the importance of zinc in plants. It actually is involved in many of the different functions in the plant. Two specifically that I want to mention today have had a lot of impact on our own farm that I look at. One is cold tolerance, and the other one is moisture absorption. So when you think about utilizing moisture inside that plant, zinc kind of regulates a lot of that. So when we think about a drought year, for example, or maybe even a super wet year, zinc is absolutely playing a big role in that plant. All right, in terms of the cold tolerance, yes, like on our farm, we're not raising a whole lot of winter crops, but for the winter crops that we do, whether that's rye or wheat or something else, if you don't have proper levels of zinc in that plant, well, it's not going to be able to withstand the cold nearly as well.
One other thing when Brian talks about these functions is you might be thinking, well, when do I need to apply the zinc? You need to have zinc in that crop all through the season. So you need good availability of zinc early in the season, which many farmers try to accomplish with a pop-up or even a 2x2 type placement. But you also need good levels in your soil so you can access that zinc throughout the season. You're going to need to take zinc in because once it's in the plant, it really locks into the tissue that it gets in, so you don't see a whole lot of movement once it's in the plant. So if the lower leaves use up the zinc that you've got and then you run out of zinc later, you'll see it show up at the top of the plant with striping on the leaves. This can often be misdiagnosed because there's a number of different nutrients that can show deficiencies similar to what zinc deficiency will look like, but it is important that you know we will need a good dose of zinc all throughout the season.
So Darren mentioned how zinc is non-mobile in the plant. Zinc is also immobile in the soil. When you think about zinc in terms of application, you might be saying, well, I'll just broadcast some out there. Okay, that's fine, but if you don't do any tillage, it's literally going to lay on the soil surface and maybe move down, I don't know, 1/10 of an inch per year, something like that, in a lot of soils. It's kind of like phosphorus. When you think about phosphorus, it doesn't move just like zinc doesn't. So with zinc, one of the things that you want to do when you apply it is be very careful about where you place it. If you put it on the soil surface and don't till it in, not only do you have to worry that number one, it's not going to get into the plant, but number two, just like with phosphorus, if you lay it on the soil surface, you could lose it to erosion. When that soil moves, the phosphorus and the zinc go along with it. So that's why, like even on our farm, we've traditionally had a lot of issues with zinc deficiencies right on the side hills. Everything else was fine, but the side hills were really short. So that's probably what I would suggest on your farm for the very first place you look for a zinc deficiency.
The other thing, Brian, that's really played into zinc deficiency is every crop you plant is going to need some zinc. Many farmers that I talk to are saying, well, my zinc program is, I put some zinc in furrow on my corn, I'm using 1 quart of zinc, I'm delivering about 2/10 of a pound of zinc out there. My corn crop needs somewhere around 2/10 of a pound of zinc, so I think I'm doing pretty good. My follow-up question is to ask the farmer, well, what's your rotation? Are you rotating with soybeans? Are you rotating with soybeans and wheat? All those crops are going to need zinc as well. And farmers say, oh, well, man, I was putting it in furrow in corn. I was worried about putting anything in furrow on my soybeans, so I just wasn't putting any out there. And if you're not putting it out on those other crops, you may be meeting the needs of that corn crop for this year, but for your soybeans and your wheat, if you're not putting it out there, you're going backwards on a 2 or 3 year rotation.
Earlier, Darren mentioned phosphorus and zinc and how those two things kind of tie together, and they absolutely do. If you have too much phosphorus compared to your zinc, you're going to have a real problem, but the reverse is also true. If there's too much zinc in relation to your phosphorus, you've got an issue. So what is the right balance? Honestly, I don't know what the exact number is, but I know what we're usually shooting for is somewhere around 10-1, maybe 8-1 in terms of a P1 phosphorus versus a zinc parts per million. So if I look at those two things and I'm in the 8-1 to 10-1 range, great. Okay, so think about that for a minute. If you had 50 parts per million of P1 phosphorus, that would be a good level for your soil. All right, that means you got to have 5 parts per million of zinc. On our farm, we've actually in some cases overdone it. A couple of spreader issues that we had and made some mistakes, and in a couple cases we just decided, hey, we're going to put a whole bunch of zinc on there, and we've actually had issues with that where we've been able to show, hey, when we do improve our phosphorus levels now, boy, we're getting more yield uptake. So there is a definite balance there, a definite ratio. Again, I don't know exactly what it is, but shoot for something like 8-1 to 10-1 on your farm. And by the way, when we talk about the zinc application overall, zinc sulfate is super cheap. So if you're at a 1/2 part per million today and you want to get to 5, go zinc sulfate. Otherwise, if you just want to feed the plant for this year, liquid with the planter is a great way to go. And in fact, using at least a little bit of liquid, even in addition to a dry zinc sulfate program, is probably a pretty good idea just to make sure that you've got that available zinc really early in the year.
And many of the growers that are raising 300 plus bushel corn per acre are putting zinc out in multiple sites because, let's face it, we're going to need a lot of zinc, number one. But the other thing, as Brian mentioned before, it doesn't move much in soil. So if you've got it sitting out there in your soil profile in several different places, like for example, say you did put some in furrow or in a 2x2, well, what happens on a dry year? The top couple of inches dry out pretty quickly. So you'd be really well served having some a little deeper in your soil. With those broadcast applications of zinc sulfate, the best thing you could do for the zinc would be to do some tillage to move it down deeper in the soil so it's available when it gets drier later in the season.
Well, once again, zinc is incredibly important for many different things in the plant. Just make sure you have a good level in your soil. You keep testing that plant later on in the year, tissue analysis, maybe doing some foliar feeding. And always remember that zinc is immobile in the plant and it's pretty immobile in soil. So make sure you're placing it where you need it.
Well, one other thing you don't need any place is our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
In 1949, Morton Buildings constructed our first machine storage building to establish our bond with the farming community. Since then, our relationship has grown, and so have our product offerings. From the smallest specialized operation to the largest agricultural enterprise, we understand the needs of your business and continue to evolve to meet industry demands. Plus, when you build a Morton building, you're backed by the strongest warranty in the business. To learn more about the Morton Advantage, visit mortonbuildings.com.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
It starts with genetics, what you're made of. It takes agronomy. It's local. It's knowing your land and having the tools to put the right product in the right place. It's built on service with trust, grit, and determination. Because it turns out, what it takes to make the best product is a lot like what it takes to make a farmer. Golden Harvest, rooted in genetics, agronomy, and service.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
I need results, so I choose the one system I trust to take weeds down and keep them down on even my toughest acres with the kind of yield potential that helps keep me in the black to deliver my kind of results season after season. I choose the Roundup Ready Xtend crop system. I choose results.
If you had unplanted acres this year, what's your plan going into next year? Today we want to talk just a little bit about what some of your management steps should be so you have a successful crop in 2020.
The first question I would ask is, did you get a cover crop in? If you did, it's going to offer you a few different choices that you wouldn't get without the cover crop. So you had something growing out there, you had a home for microbial life, you had something growing out there, so chances are it wasn't completely underwater all year. So those things are good. If you got a cover crop in, you can pretty much rotate to whatever you want. I think you're going to be able to expect the microbial life in the soil to be pretty good, and chances are that ground was a little bit drier than the guys that didn't get in, so maybe it's a field you're going to be able to get in on time as well.
The only exception there is if you raise just radishes, for example. There are a few crops like radishes that won't support mycorrhiza fungi, so that means you're going to have fallow syndrome next year. If you didn't get a crop planted this year and you kept that ground black, so in other words there were no weeds growing, no cover crop, nothing, that's where I worry about fallow syndrome. Or if all I had growing was something like radishes that doesn't support mycorrhiza fungi. What that means is we're going to tell you, do not plant corn next year because you're going to have fallow syndrome. You're going to have purple corn. The reason why is your phosphorus is still sitting there. But without that mycorrhiza fungi, now you've got a real issue because the mycorrhiza fungi really helps bring that phosphorus into the plant. Now a lot of people will ask me, well, can we overcome that by just putting a whole bunch more phosphorus on? The other day on our radio show, we had Neil Kinsey on, and he said the number was something like 100,000 times the mycorrhiza fungi help phosphorus availability and other nutrient availability. Well, I don't think we can put on 100,000 times worth of phosphorus. Even if we put on 4 times worth of phosphorus, it's probably not enough to overcome that. You can try throwing some biologicals on, throw everything at it if you want. But I'm still super worried about planting corn there. Instead, if it was me, I'd plant soybeans.
One other consideration, Brian, would be, let's say you couldn't get in that field all year and it was just standing weeds the whole time. I don't think you're going to have the fallow syndrome if you had a good crop of weeds growing, but you are going to have an unbelievable amount of weed pressure for the next few years. So that certainly is a consideration as you make plans for 2020. Use residual herbicides and use as many as you can. Get a really good strategy out there. So if you're going soybeans, definitely start with the 3-pre strategy and add some more in-season residuals too. On the corn side, here again, you can use a full rate of a group 15 to start with, and you can come back with some more later on. So take a look at what the labels allow you to do to get as many residual type products out there. Otherwise, you're going to have some weed escapes, no question, and probably even if you do the residuals, you're still going to have a few weed escapes. You just want to be really conscious of this.
If your ground got flooded this year, it mostly died. And what I mean by that is a lot of the beneficial microbes in the soil pretty well died off because of lack of oxygen. So keep that in mind moving forward. Use lots of biologicals to help re-energize that soil. Get crop growing on there as soon as you can. Work on improving your drainage. That means adding some tile most likely, potentially adding some calcium, reducing compaction going forward. Just do everything you can to get more life in that soil as quickly as possible and keep it there.
Now, one thing you don't want living in that soil is our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Our Weed of the Week is bird cucumber.
Brian, this is one of those things that I don't like. I don't like weeds that are vines. They get to be tough. If they start growing and you don't catch them immediately when they get started, when they vine out, they've got growing points spread out over a large area, and when they're a climbing type vine, they'll wrap around plants, and it's just tough to get good coverage.
The leaves on bird cucumber are going to have 5 points to them, or 5 lobes that are kind of pointed. Again, Darren said it's a climbing vine, and the first thing that I think about with these climbing vines is Roundup isn't very good on them. So in terms of weed control, it's not quite as simple as, oh, we'll just go spray Roundup.
No, it's not, and hopefully you never have to see the weed because your pre-emerge program wipes it out. If we have good crop canopy out there, that's going to be the other thing that you're definitely going to need throughout the growing season. If you've got some gaps in the canopy, we oftentimes see bird cucumber come in really late in the season. So in corn, I would start with a couple different things. I like verdict down in the no-till. I love the burn down aspect of the sharpen. Plus, you can use a pretty decent rate to sharpen at least a couple ounces on corn, and then you get some good residual. We've also had pretty decent luck with Balance Flex if you get enough moisture to keep that thing activated.
Post-emerge status is the best, but you can run with one of the HPPDs and throw a little atrazine with it. That's turned to soybeans. Here we really like metribuzin, that's the best, but throw a little Authority or Valor with that. Then post-emerge, keep in mind with bird cucumber, a lot of the ALS products actually still work. So you can use something like First Rate or Old Classic and Pinnacle. If you go to wheat, it's kind of the same deal. We've got Affinity, for example. All those ALS or SU products are pretty decent post-emerge there. I still prefer Husky over those products post-emerge in wheat. And then pre-emerge in wheat, we'd really encourage you, start with Sharpen.
Well, bird cucumber can be one of the worst weeds that you'll fight on your farm, so get it under control early and often throughout the season. It's all time for this week's Weed. Iron Talk is coming up next.
More choices, more money. With Bayer Plus Rewards, you choose from our broad portfolio of high-performance products. Earn more money on the eligible products that are right for your farm. And use our new portal to see your purchases, track your rewards, and decide how you want to use them. Visit mybayerplus.com to sign in and start earning. That's the advantage of more control in your hands. That's the plus.
Tough, precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/agphd.
What's the most complex industry on Earth? It isn't big data or commodities, not genetics or meteorology or even logistics. It's a business that involves them all. It's farming. And we're proud to work with generations of American farmers in the most complex and rewarding industry on Earth.
Do you feel like there's never enough time to get everything done before planting? The window for spring work is quick and unforgiving. Give yourself the upper hand with the ProTill High Performance High Speed Disc. More and more farmers agree the ProTill is the right tool for springfield conditions and heavy residue management. Zero maintenance bearings, independent disc technology, oversized pins and bushings allow the ProTill to handle whatever field or conditions you can throw at it. Degelman High Performance Equipment.
You spend all year working hard to get as much yield as possible at harvest. The last thing you want to do is put your grain in the bin and have it spoil before you take it to market. Introducing the Grain Temp Guard from Farm Shop MFG. Designed and built by a farmer looking for a low-cost monitoring solution for existing bins, the Grain Temp Guard tracks temperature and humidity with an alarm system to alert you when your grain exceeds safe thresholds. For more information on a system for your bins, visit farmshopmfg.com.
Engineered to be the most advanced concave system available, the XBR system threshes all crops, reduces grain loss, and significantly improves grain quality and storability.
Probably the biggest difference that we noticed right away was the grain quality. The sample was much better. With this XBR system, now we've cut down rotor loss significantly. I can switch out a 2-pound cover plate in just a few minutes and jumped about 30% more on our capacity.
Visit EstisPerformanceConcaves.com.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
At Harvest, you have one goal: finding the perfect flow of grain from the field to the bin. Case IH axial flow combines are engineered for matched capacity to deliver proven grain savings, so you can keep efficiency flowing smoothly. Find yours with the Case IH axial flow.
How do you get micronutrients in balance when levels of each micro vary across a field? We'll discuss that challenge in today's Iron Talk. First of all, to feed each year's crop, we have consistently used a micronutrient blend like Micro 1000 with our planter. To fix individual shortages going forward, though, here's the strategy we found to give us the most success. Grid sample your fields, and then, number 1, apply a blend that gets most or all nutrient levels above the minimums without pushing any one nutrient above the maximum. Use variable rate technology as that particular rate may vary. Then, number 2, you can follow by variable rate applying individual micros with dry products where significant cost savings could be gained. Or, number 3, you could variable rate with liquid products where immediate availability or minute rates are needed. Using a liquid solution allows you to apply super low rates by mixing it with 10 gallons of water to get a great spread. With the dry products, it may take 12 or 24 months for all of that fertilizer to come available and start showing up on your soil tests. So think of this as a 3-year plan before you start judging the results. When it comes to micros, feeding the soil and getting things in proper balance is shown to be the best strategy, as micros will be there not just for this crop, but for many crops to come. Again, it all starts with a great soil testing program. You can follow up with plant tissue analysis once per week through the growing season to check your results. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, we want to encourage you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show, where we take your live phone calls and answer agronomic questions all throughout the show each weekday. That's at 2 p.m. Central on SiriusXM Channel 147.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.